As pre-meds, a lot of times you could be in the classroom and you're like, oh, this is cool, this biochemistry, okay, cool. And it doesn't really translate for you. But then when you get into clinical environments, you get to see the diseases that you can learn about. You get to see the biological processes. So a lot of times I like to take like the clinical condition. I'll say, listen, they've got this patient who's got this asthma. Okay, with this asthma, what's happening? Okay, let's take it back to your physics class and let's talk about how the diameter of a circle and surface tension, how that works in the alveoli, the lungs. And so I try to bring in those basic science concepts. So we love to teach, we love to educate. And so I get excited in these clinical experience opportunities because it's an opportunity to see your guys' eyes just go, oh, this is what I've been working so hard for. It's for this. This is why we took physics. This is why we took chemistry, because all this stuff comes into play to keep patients alive in a practical way. Now, we've talked about this lifelong learning, getting over the fear of not knowing everything. So let's talk about some key strategies to not be that mistake-prone medical student that I just had and to be better. The very first thing, guys, is when you guys go for clinical experiences, whether it's shadowing or your actual clinical rotations, is it's not okay. Again, you don't have to know it all, but it's not okay to become unprepared for your level of training. It's not okay to come and show up in a clinical environment not prepared at your clinical level. So if you are a pre-med and you're going into a clinical environment, nothing is really expected of you from a clinical knowledge standpoint. However, you should have a basic understanding of the specialty you're going to shadow. So if someone comes to shadow me as a pre-med and I'm an anesthesiologist and I say, hey, you're shadowing me as an anesthesiologist, what do you think is cool about anesthesia? Or what do you know about anesthesia? And they're like, anesthesia, isn't that with a foot doctor? And you have no idea what anesthesia is? It tells me that you're just hunting around for shadowing opportunities and you don't give a crap about what I'm doing. You don't value my time, my day, something I spent my life cultivating as a great anesthesiologist. You don't value it. And as a result, I see you're not prepared for this moment, so I'm not going to teach you. And I'm not going to write you a letter of recommendation because you're not thrilled to be here. You're wasting my gosh darn time. My gosh darn breaths are wasted on you. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? That's what you guys have to understand. Come prepared to your clinical level. Understand what the specialty is. Understand what that is. At a pre-med level, you shouldn't know the clinical stuff, but if I take a clinical situation, excuse me, and I make it basic science for you, so if I start talking about delta P, if I say, hey, listen, a lot of physiology is based on physics. That's why they start with that same phys. And within the physiology, a lot of times we're talking about flow, whether it's flow of air, whether it's flow of blood in terms of blood pressure, right? So that delta P, that gradient is very important. Does that make sense? And I'll talk about systolic blood pressure, diastolics, and I'll talk about airflow to the lungs and how to increase oxygenation with PEEP and so forth. And we'll have this discussion and I'll bring it all back to delta P, a basic physics concept. P1, P2, flow is determined by the higher pressure, right? The better that gradient, the faster the flow. And so we set that up for you. And if I talk to you about that and you've taken physics and you can't get it back to me, then I'm looking at you crazy like you aren't a prepared student because yes, you shouldn't know about heart physiology, but you should know about basic physics. So I'm judging you based on that. When you get to the medical student level, now I'm judging you at that clinical level. So if I talk about a common disease like COPD or asthma, and as it relates to anesthesia, you should have an understanding of what COPD is, what asthma is, and how that fits in with our lung physiology and what I'm trying to do as an anesthesiologist. So you should understand how I do it as an anesthesiologist, but you should understand what those clinical conditions are, because that should be common knowledge, bread and butter for all medical students. Because everybody's C. So whatever your level is, come prepared at that level. When you do show up, right, and you are prepared at your appropriate level, show up professional, y'all. Gosh, dang it. One of my favorite students is a medical student currently right now. And he just finished up his second year of medical school. He's taking step 1 right now. And he came to shadow me not too long ago. He came to hang out and talk about step 1. And he shows up, and he's a medical student, and he shows up in what looked like sweatpants. They were scrubs, but they were big and baggy and a weird color. They looked like sweatpants. And then he had a sweatshirt on that said med student. And I get it. That's cool and everything. But it's a clinical environment you're coming into, and you're wearing a sweatshirt and what looks like sweatpants to my clinical environment. So immediately I'm like, come on, man, you're better than that. And I had to give him a stern talking to about his wardrobe. But I can't tell you how many times I've had pre-meds show up to a clinical environment in sweats, in hoodies, open-toed shoes, things that are not appropriate for a clinical environment. I wear Crocs every day, but I wear my closed-toed Crocs. You can't be wearing your open-toed shoes. So for you guys, when you show up, yes, you want to be prepared. And the second P, you want to be professional. Be professionally dressed. It sets the tone for the day. Overdressed. Don't wear a tux, but if you wear a suit, whatever. Be overdressed because it sets the tone. And they're like, hey, listen, at least you put on a clean shirt today and you put on a collared shirt and he's dressed professionally. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt on other things. It starts the day on a high tone. But if you show up and you're dressed poorly, I'm going to immediately start to judge you. You don't take this seriously. You're showing up. Come on, in your pajamas? Come on. SpongeBob shoes on. Let's go. So we start there. So we show up prepared. We show up professionally. The other thing we show up, the third P, is we show up promptly. So 3 Ps. Prepared, professionally, and then promptly. If I tell you, hey, this is anesthesia, we start early. So the first patient will get here at 6 a.m. I get there at 5:30 to set up. What time should you show up as a pre-med or a medical student? If I say first patient shows up at 6, I show up at 5:30 to set up, what time should you show up? Definitely not later than 5:30 if you want me to take you seriously. If anything, you should shoot for 5:20, 5:25, so that way you say, hey, listen, I'm here. Let me know when you're here, Dr. Pineset, and we can meet up. So that way I know my time is valuable and you're not trying to waste a second of it. If you stroll in at 6, because that's when the patient shows up, I'm already judging you. If you show up at 6:05, oh, well, the patient got here at 6, I can get here at 6:05, I'm judging you. Show up on time promptly. Again, it sets the tone for how serious you take it and how serious I should take you. Prepared, professional, and promptly.